welcome, and thank you for being here tonight. Wherever you are, however this day has left you, you can set it all down now. Let your body sink into the bed. Let the pillow hold the weight of your head. Let your shoulders fall just a little bit further than they already have. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed, and let your breathing slow down all on its own. There is nothing to do now but rest. As you drift off tonight, you will gently come to understand something about feeling lost, and about what the oldest, quietest wisdom in the world has always said to those who feel that way. You do not need to concentrate. You do not need to remember anything. Just let the words come and go like soft waves, and let whatever understanding wants to arrive on its own. So let your body grow heavy now. Let the bed hold you completely. And let us begin. There is a kind of feeling that almost everyone has known, at some point in their life, though very few people talk about it openly. It is not exactly sadness, and it is not quite fear. It arrives more quietly than either of those. It is the feeling of not quite knowing where you are going, of looking up from the middle of your days and finding that the path, which once seemed so clear, has grown soft and blurred at the edges, of wondering, in the small hours of the night, whether the choices you have made were the right ones, whether the life you are living is the one you were meant to live, whether the version of yourself walking around in the world is the real one, or only a kind of shape you have been slowly practicing. That feeling, the feeling of being a little lost. And tonight, very gently, we are going to sit with that feeling together. We are not going to fix it, or solve it, or argue it away. We are simply going to let it rest here beside us in the dark, and look at it with quiet eyes, the way you might look at something through a window on a rainy evening, watching the water move down the glass without needing to go outside. Because the oldest teachings, the ones that have been carried through centuries and across great distances, passed quietly from one human heart to another, like a lamp handed along a dark corridor. Those teachings have something very gentle to say about this feeling, something that might surprise you with how soft it is, something that, if you let it settle into you slowly, the way warmth settles into a cold room when someone lights a fire, might loosen something in your chest that has been held a little too tightly for a little too long. Let your jaw soften now. Let your hands rest open, or closed, however they have fallen. Let the weight of the blanket remind you that you are held. The teaching begins, as so many of the oldest teachings do, not with an answer, but with a very simple observation about the nature of things. And the observation is this, that everything moves, everything changes. Everything that appears solid and fixed is, if you look at it long enough and gently enough, actually in a state of slow and continuous becoming. The mountains are being worn, grain by grain, by water and wind. The stars are moving through the dark, though so slowly we cannot perceive it in a single lifetime. The cells of the body you were born with have been replaced so many times over the years that you are, in a very quiet and literal sense, not the same body that once learned to walk, or first read a book, or fell in love for the first time. Everything is always, gently, becoming something else. And so, the teaching continues, in its calm and unhurried way. Is there not something a little natural, a little inevitable, in the feeling of not quite knowing where you stand? If everything is always shifting, then the feeling of standing on uncertain ground is not a failure of navigation. It is simply what it feels like to be alive, to be present in the middle of a world that is always turning, always softening one thing into another, always gently erasing the edges between what was and what is becoming. Let a slow breath leave the body now. There is no need to hold anything. In the old stories, the ones passed down through generations of monks and wanderers and quiet thinkers sitting beneath trees in the warm evenings, there is a figure who appears again and again. Not a hero exactly, not a conqueror or a king. The figure who appears most often in the oldest wisdom is simply a traveler, someone walking, someone who has left one place and has not yet arrived at another, someone moving through the in-between. And what is remarkable, when you sit with these stories long enough, is that the in-between is never presented as a problem. The traveler is not failing because they have not yet arrived. The path itself, the walking, the noticing, the way the light falls differently on different mornings, the way the same road looks entirely unlike itself when the season changes, all of that is the thing. All of that is where the life is happening. There is a word that appears in these teachings, a word in an old language, a word for the way all things are always in a state of gentle passing. It describes not loss, exactly, but the simple quality of transience, the way a cloud does not fail when it slowly changes shape and dissolves into the wider sky, the way a candle does not fail when its flame bends in a soft wind, the way an evening does not fail when it gradually darkens into night. Everything is passing, everything is moving through. And that movement, that gentle and continuous release, is not something to resist, but something to notice with great tenderness. You can let your muscles grow heavier now. There is no need for them to hold anything up. The bed is doing that. The night is doing that. You can simply let go of whatever you have been quietly carrying. What the old teachings say, in their unhurried and compassionate way, is that much of our suffering, and they use that word in a very broad and gentle sense, much of the quiet ache we carry through our days, comes not from the changing itself, but from our resistance to it, from the way we hold on, from the way we reach back toward the shore as the boat moves slowly out into the open water. We want things to stay as they were. We want ourselves to stay as we were. And when we look up and find that we have changed, that the landscape of our inner life has shifted, that we are not quite who we were last year or 5 years ago, that the things we once were certain of have grown soft and uncertain, we read that change as loss. We read that uncertainty as failure. We tell ourselves that we should know by now, that we should have found our footing by now, that being lost, at this age, in this life, means something has gone wrong. But the teaching reaches out, very gently, the way someone might reach out in the dark to find your hand, and it says, nothing has gone wrong. Let that rest in you for a moment. Just let it be there. Nothing has gone wrong. Feeling lost is not a sign that you have failed the journey. It is a sign that you are on it, that you are moving through something real, that you have not simply stopped and settled into the first comfortable place you found and refused to look any further. The lost feeling, when you turn toward it very gently and look at it without flinching, is often just the feeling of being in transition, of being between one version of yourself and the next, of standing in the doorway between what you have been and what you are becoming. And doorways, by their nature, are neither one room nor the other. They are their own kind of place, brief and open and full of the cool air of both sides at once. The breath can slow down even further now. There is time. There is nothing but time, stretching out soft and dark and quiet all around you. In one of the quieter stories that comes down through these old teachings, there is an image of a river, not a dramatic river, not one with falls or rapids or a great rushing current. Just a wide, slow river on an overcast afternoon, moving through a valley between low hills, its surface dark and still except for the faintest motion, the gentlest suggestion of flow. And someone sits on the bank of that river. They are not watching for anything in particular. They are not waiting for a boat or hoping to see something emerge from the far bank. They are simply sitting and breathing and watching the water move. And what the teacher in that story says, quietly, sitting down beside the person on the bank, is that the mind is like the river, that thoughts are like the water, that they come and they move through and they go, and the river does not hold on to any of it. The river does not grieve the particular shape of the water that passed through it this morning. It does not try to stop the water from moving on. It simply allows the water to be water and to do what water does, which is move. And that quality, the quality of allowing things to pass through without gripping them, the quality of being present to what is here without demanding that it stay, that is what the old word describes. That gentle, open quality of allowing, of not holding, of trusting that what comes next, whatever it is, will also be allowed to pass through in its own time. Let the thoughts that are still moving through your mind be just like that. Let them drift. Let them slow. You do not need to chase them or sort them or settle them. You can simply let them be there, like leaves turning slowly in a wide, still current, moving towards somewhere, unhurried, undemanding, quiet. The body can grow heavier still. The pillow, the mattress, the whole quiet room can hold you now. You are allowed to rest completely. You are allowed to not know, tonight, where you are going. You are allowed to lie in the middle of your life, with its open questions and its unmade decisions and its half-finished thoughts, and simply breathe and let the dark be warm around you. Because this, right here, is what the teachings have always pointed toward, in the end. Not the arrival, not the resolution, not the moment when everything finally makes sense and the path becomes clear, and the lost feeling dissolves into certainty. The teachings point toward this moment, this ordinary, unremarkable, irreplaceable moment of simply being present, in the body, in the breath, in the quiet, of allowing the not knowing to be here without fighting it, of finding that when you stop demanding answers from the darkness is actually quite warm, quite soft, quite safe. There was a monk, in a time very far from this one, living in a small room in a quiet place surrounded by trees, and it is said that students used to come to him when they were troubled, when they had lost their way, when the life they had imagined for themselves had turned into something different from what they had hoped, and they did not know how to find their bearings again. They would arrive at his door, sometimes walking for days to reach him, and they would sit down, and they would pour out their confusion, their grief, their sense of being adrift, and he would listen, for a very long time. He would listen without hurrying them toward a conclusion, and then, when they had finished, he would often say very little. He would perhaps gesture toward the window, toward the trees, toward the light moving slowly through the branches, and he would say something like, "Do you see how the tree does not know which way the wind will come from tomorrow, and yet it is rooted, and yet it grows? You do not need to know which way the wind will come from tomorrow. That is not what you are being asked to do, tonight or any night. You are being asked only to be rooted, to be present, to let your body rest and your breath slow, and your mind drift toward the soft, quiet edge of sleep, where the questions become lighter, and the answers stop mattering quite so much, and everything that felt so heavy begins to lift just a little, like mist rising from a field in the early morning, slow and pale and weightless. Let the shoulders drop a little more now. Let the breath be soft and even. Let the space between the thoughts grow wider and more restful. The teaching does not ask you to be certain. It does not ask you to have arrived. It asks something much gentler and much more possible than that. It asks only that you be here, in this moment, in this breath, in this quiet room, with its dark and its warmth, and the sound of your own heartbeat, steady and slow beneath everything else, carrying you through the night, the way a river carries a leaf, gently, without effort, without needing to know where the water finally ends. And so you are here, and that is enough. That has always been enough. We tend to think of being lost as the opposite of being found, as though found is the destination, the resolution, the place where everything clicks into place, and you can finally set your bag down and say, "Yes, I am here. This is where I was always meant to arrive." But the oldest teachings, if you sit with them long enough, in the way you might sit by a warm fire on a quiet evening, not reading, not thinking, just present, begin to suggest something a little different. They begin to suggest that found and lost might not be opposites at all, that they might be more like two banks of the same river, two sides of the same slow breath, in and out, neither one wrong, neither one more true than the other. Because what does it mean, really, to be found? The teachers asked this question, in their quiet rooms, in their wandering years, in the long, slow evenings they spent watching the stars appear, one by one above the hills. What does it mean to be found? And the answer that kept arriving, softly, like a bird landing on a branch, was that to be found is simply to be present to where you actually are, not where you imagined you would be, not where you think you should be, but where you actually, simply, quietly are, right now, in this body, in this breath, in this ordinary, unrepeatable moment. And you are here. You are exactly here. Let the mind drift now. There is no need to hold this thought or that one. Let them all be like clouds moving through a wide and patient sky, slow and pale and soft at the edges, moving at their own unhurried speed, going wherever clouds go, which is somewhere, and nowhere, and everywhere at once, without urgency, without effort, without the need to arrive. The room is dark. The room is warm. The blanket is a gentle weight. The pillow is soft beneath your head, and somewhere below all the thinking, below all the wondering, and the questioning, and the quiet unease that sometimes gathers in the chest at night, there is something that is simply resting, something that has always been resting, even in the most uncertain times, something that does not need to know the way forward, because it has always been home. It has always been here. It is the part of you that breathes without being told to. The part that keeps your heart beating through the night without any effort on your part at all. The part that has carried you through every uncertain year without once losing you completely. That part is not lost. That part has never been lost. It is here, steady and slow and breathing, carrying you through this night the way it has carried you through all the others. Let the breath be slow, let the body be still, let the mind be soft. There is a quality that the old teachings return to again and again, in the way that water returns to the same low place, no matter how many times it is moved. A quality that is described in many different words, in many different languages, across many centuries and many quiet rooms, but which points always toward the same simple thing. It is a kind of allowing, a kind of softness toward one's own experience, a willingness to let what is here be here, to let what is passing pass, to stop bracing against the uncertainty and instead let it rest beside you, like an old companion you have stopped arguing with, someone who simply walks with you now, whose presence you have grown accustomed to, whose company you have come to find, if not exactly comfortable, then at least familiar, at least not frightening, at least something you can breathe around. That is the beginning of what the teachers called peace, not the absence of uncertainty, not the end of questions, just the slow, gentle discovery that you can breathe around the questions, that you can lie here in the dark with everything unresolved, and still be warm, still be breathing, still be held by the night and the bed and the quiet all around you. The thoughts are slowing now. You can feel it, somewhere beneath the listening, a gradual softening at the edges of things, a slight loosening of whatever it is we hold when we are awake, when we are trying, when we are moving through the world with our eyes open and our attention gathered. It is beginning, very gently, to release. Let it release. Let the trying soften. Let the holding soften. Let even the listening soften, so that the words become less like things to follow and more like the sound of rain on a roof above you, steady and soft and without any demand, simply there, simply present, simply falling. In the old stories, when a traveler finally lay down to rest by the road, having walked all day without knowing exactly where the road would lead, having moved through country that was unfamiliar, past landmarks they did not recognize, through weather that changed from cool to warm to cool again, when they finally lay down on the soft ground and let the sky be above them and the earth be below them, what they found, almost always, was that the lying down itself was a kind of arrival. Not the arrival they had imagined, not the destination they had set out toward, but an arrival nevertheless, the body meeting the ground, the breath meeting the air, the tired, uncertain, wandering self, finally, simply, resting, right here, right now. The bed is the ground, and the dark is the sky, and the breath is the road, and you have been walking long enough. You can lie down now. You can let the body be heavy, and the mind be soft, and the night be gentle, all around you. You can let the questions wait. They will be there in the morning, patient and quiet, and in the morning you will be rested, and they will look different in the light, less large, less pressing, more manageable, more like simply part of the landscape, and less like walls. But that is the morning, and this is now, and now is for resting. Let the breath be slower, let the jaw be soft, let even the eyes, behind their closed lids, let even those small muscles loosen and rest, because there is nothing to see tonight, nothing to watch for, nothing coming that requires your attention, or your effort, or your vigilance. You are safe. The night is long and warm and quiet. And somewhere in the gentle dark, something very old and very patient is simply sitting beside you, the way a kind presence sits beside someone who is sleeping, not watching over them in any anxious way, but simply there, calm and unhurried, breathing with them, letting the night move at the pace that nights move when no one is rushing them along. In that quiet, in that soft and patient dark, the teaching continues to unfold, not as a series of things to remember, but as a kind of warmth, a kind of slow settling. The way understanding sometimes arrives, not in a flash, but in a gradual dissolving of the thing that was in its way. The way you sometimes realize, waking on a morning after a long and restful sleep, that something that troubled you the night before has simply become smaller overnight. Not because anything changed in the world, but because the sleep moved through you and carried some of the weight of it away, the way a tide carries things gently out to sea while you are not watching, leaving the shore quieter and cleaner in the morning light. Sleep does that. Rest does that. The simple act of letting go, of allowing the night to be night and the body to be a body that needs to rest, that act is itself a kind of wisdom, a quiet agreement with the nature of things, a soft yes to the rhythm that has been holding you all along, the rhythm of waking and sleeping, of effort and rest, of the long day and the longer, darker, gentler night. You are in the gentler part now. You are in the part where nothing is required, where the breath can be shallow or deep, where the thoughts can be present or absent, where you can drift toward the edge of sleep or already be over it, and all of it is perfectly, completely, quietly fine. Let the body be completely still now. Let it be so still that the boundary between the body and the bed begins to soften. Let the warmth of the blanket and the warmth of the body become one warmth, continuous and gentle, spreading slowly through the arms and the legs and the chest, and the quiet space behind the closed eyes. The river is still moving. Somewhere out in the dark, the wide, slow river is still carrying its water toward wherever water finally goes. The clouds are still drifting through the night sky above this building, above this room, pale and soft, and moving at the speed that clouds move when no one is watching them. The trees are standing in the dark, not knowing which way the wind will come from tomorrow, and not needing to know, rooted and breathing in their own slow way, patient and present, and deeply, quietly at rest. And you are resting too, beneath all of it, beneath the wondering and the not knowing and the quiet searching that is so much a part of being alive and awake in the world. Beneath all of that, you are resting. The breath is doing what the breath does. The heart is doing what the heart does. The body is sinking slowly, slowly, softly into the support that has always been there beneath it. You do not need to know where you are going tonight. You do not need to know where you are going tomorrow. You can simply be here, in the breathing, in the warmth, in the soft and patient dark, letting the night carry you the way it carries everyone, slowly, without effort, without destination, simply through the hours, from one breath to the next, from this moment to the next quiet moment, growing softer with each one, growing slower with each one, drifting further and further from the waking world, and deeper into the still and restful dark that is waiting for you, that has always been waiting for you, warm and wide and without a single demand, simply open. Simply open, the way a hand opens when it has been holding something for a very long time and finally, in the quiet, remembers that it does not have to hold anymore. The fingers loosen, the palm softens, and whatever was there drifts away on its own, not dropped, not released with any effort, just allowed to go, the way the last light of evening allows itself to go, gradually, without resistance, into the deeper blue, and then into the dark. There is a teaching, old and soft, that says the mind is like the sky, not like the weather inside the sky, not like the clouds or the wind or the rain that moves through it, but like the sky itself, which is always there, which is always open, which holds all of it, the storms and the stillness alike, without becoming any of it. The sky does not become the cloud. It simply holds the cloud, the way it holds the sunlight, the way it holds the dark, each thing passing through it and then passing on, and the sky remaining, open and wide, and quietly itself. You have heard things like this before, perhaps, and tonight there is no need to think about them carefully, or to understand them completely, or to hold them in the mind as something useful to remember. Tonight they arrive simply as a kind of weather of their own, soft and slow, moving through the room the way warmth moves through a room when the heating has been on all evening and everything is settled and still. You do not need to track it. You do not need to reach for it. It is simply here, in the air, in the quiet, dissolving gently into the space between one breath and the next. Let the breath be a little slower now. Let it arrive and leave without any help, without any shaping, without any effort at all. The body knows how to breathe. It has always known. Even in sleep it will go on breathing, gently, all through the long hours, without once needing you to remind it, without once requiring your attention or your care. The body carries on, the heart carries on, and somewhere in the deep interior of that quiet carrying on, there is something that has never once felt lost, because it has never once needed to know the way. The Buddhists have a word, and it is soft to say, like a door closing gently on a still room. It is the word for the quality of awareness that simply notices, that simply receives, that does not reach or grasp or judge or follow, that sits at the center, the way a lamp sits at the center of a room, not caring what shadows fall across the walls, not troubled by the shapes the light makes, simply present, simply warm, simply burning at its own slow pace in the quiet. That quality is already in you. It was never somewhere else. It was never something you needed to travel toward, or arrive at, or earn through effort or understanding. It was here. Even on the days when everything felt uncertain, even on the evenings when the questions crowded close, and the sense of not knowing felt heavy and large and pressing from all sides. Even then, underneath it all, that quiet noticing was present, holding the whole thing the way the sky holds everything, without strain, without preference, without needing any of it to be different than it was. And tonight it is especially easy to feel it, or rather, to stop feeling the things that usually crowd around it and obscure it, the way clouds obscure the sky without actually touching it, without actually changing it in any way. Tonight the clouds are very slow. Tonight they are thin and pale and drifting at the pace of deep sleep, moving so gently that they barely seem to move at all, and through the spaces between them there is only the quiet, the dark, the open, and the still. Let the shoulders soften just a little more. Let any last small holding in the chest or the throat release itself into the breath, into the warmth, into the long and patient night that asks nothing of you at all. There is another teaching, and it comes quietly, without urgency. It says that the feeling of being lost is not a sign that you are failing. It says that the feeling of not knowing is not a sign that something has gone wrong inside you or around you. It says, very gently, that confusion is sometimes simply the mind meeting something that is larger than the categories it has built for itself, something that does not fit inside the boxes the mind constructs to make the world manageable, and that the discomfort of that is not a warning. It is an opening, a widening, the way a river widens as it nears the sea, becoming less urgent, less defined, its banks growing lower and softer, the current spreading out and slowing, the water losing its insistence as it finds more room, growing calmer as it grows less certain of its edges. Being lost, in that soft sense, is sometimes simply the beginning of becoming larger, of finding that you are not as small and contained as you thought you were, that the self which felt so solid and particular is in fact much more like the river than like the stone, more like the water moving through the landscape than like the landscape itself, constantly changing, constantly moving, constantly taking the shape of whatever it encounters, and not diminished by any of it, but made somehow more itself, more fluid, more at ease with its own motion. The night holds all of that very gently. The dark holds all of that the way deep water holds things, without gripping, without judgment, simply surrounding them in its own slow and patient coolness. And you are held in just that way, right now, in this moment, in this room, in this bed, in this quiet, in this warmth, that is gradually, softly, becoming the only thing there is. The body is very still. The breath is very slow. The mind is moving at the pace of something that is nearly sleeping, its thoughts loosening their edges, losing their sharp outlines, becoming more like impressions than like thoughts, more like shapes glimpsed through frosted glass than like clear and defined ideas, softening, softening, drifting further from the foreground and deeper into the gentle interior dark. Somewhere, a long time ago, someone sat very still beneath a tree and let the night move through them. Let the questions move through them without reaching for answers. Let the confusion move through them without trying to resolve it. Let the not knowing simply be there, large and patient and undemanding, the way the sky is large and patient and undemanding, and felt, in the stillness of that allowing, something ease. Something that had been held for a very long time, ease itself gently open, Not dramatically, not with any sudden shift or revelation, but the way ice eases into water in the early spring, gradually, without announcement, returning to its original nature, fluid and free and without a fixed shape. That ease is available to every person who has ever sat in the quiet and allowed themselves not to know. Every person who has ever closed their eyes and let the questions be questions and the dark be dark and the night be night without needing any of it to be resolved by morning. Every person who has ever, even once, surrendered the effort of understanding and found that the space left behind was not empty but full of a warmth and a stillness that needed no name, and asked for nothing and gave everything, simply by being there. You are in that space now, or you are very close to it. So close that the distinction hardly matters anymore, because the edges between here and there have grown soft, the way edges grow soft in the deepest part of a long and restful evening, when the light has been low for hours, and the body has been still, and the mind has been drifting at its own slow pace, through half-formed thoughts and quiet impressions, and the warm and shapeless territory that lies just before sleep. Let the eyes rest more deeply behind their closed lids. Let the face be completely soft, every small muscle around the eyes and the mouth and the jaw letting go of whatever quiet work it was still doing. Whatever last small holding on was still happening without your noticing. The face can be as still as a face in sleep. The face can let go of expression entirely, because there is no one to express anything to, and there is nothing that needs expressing, and the quiet is complete and kind and requires nothing from you at all. The old teachers spoke often of compassion, and they meant something wider than the word sometimes carries. They meant a kind of tenderness that includes everything, that leaves nothing out, that extends to the frightened and the confused and the lost as naturally and as easily as warmth extends from a fire to everything near it, without effort, without selection, without needing to decide who is worthy of the warmth and who is not. They meant a compassion that looks at the feeling of being lost and does not try to fix it or argue it away or replace it with certainty, but simply sits beside it, warm and present, the way a kind presence sits beside someone who is sleeping. And perhaps the most important direction in which that compassion can flow is inward, toward the self that is lying here in the dark, wondering, uncertain, carrying its questions into the night, toward the mind that does not always know the way forward, and the heart that does not always know what it wants, and the body that is simply tired and asking, in its own quiet way, to rest. That tenderness is available to all of those parts of you, right now, in this moment, without your needing to do anything to deserve it or earn it or prepare yourself to receive it. It is simply here. It has always been here, the way the warmth in the blanket has been here all along, patient and steady, waiting only for the body to be still enough to feel it fully. Feel it now. Let the warmth of the blanket and the warmth of the body and the warmth of something that has no name but that feels like being held. Let all of that warmth be one warmth, continuous and complete, spreading through the chest and down through the arms and into the hands, through the hips and down through the long quiet of the legs and into the feet that have carried you through so many days and that are resting now, completely resting, heavy and warm and still against the softness of the bed. The river does not know where it is going, and this does not trouble the river. The cloud does not know what shape it will be tomorrow, and this does not trouble the cloud. The tree does not know which direction the first light will come from in the morning, and this does not trouble the tree. They are all, in their own quiet ways, completely at peace with the not knowing, because the not knowing is simply the nature of moving through time, the nature of being a living thing inside a world that is always larger than the understanding of any single living thing within it. And you are that too, a living thing inside a world that is larger, a warm and breathing thing lying in the dark, surrounded by the quiet and the warmth and the long, unhurried patience of the night, drifting at the speed of something that is nearly sleeping, growing softer with each breath, growing quieter with each slow and gentle exhale. The thoughts growing more distant now, more like the sound of water heard from another room than like thoughts that need to be followed or understood or held, simply present at the edges of awareness, gentle and unhurried, and gradually, growing further away. There is nothing to arrive at tonight. There is no destination inside this dark. There is only the breath and the warmth, and the body growing heavier with each passing moment, sinking more completely into the softness beneath it, the way something very heavy and very tired sinks into deep and undisturbed water, not falling, not struggling, simply descending at its own slow pace through layers of quiet that grow softer and warmer and more complete the deeper they go, the surface growing distant above, the light growing dim and then dimmer, the sounds of the waking world growing faint and then fainter, until there is only the slow dark and the warmth and the breath and the deep and generous stillness that is always here. The way the darkness is always here, not as an absence but as a kind of fullness, a deep and patient fullness that holds everything within it, the way the night holds the sleeping world, without grasping, without demanding, without asking anything to be other than exactly what it is. The teachers had a word for this. They had many words, soft words worn smooth by centuries of use, passed from one quiet voice to another across long spans of time, the way a stone is passed from hand to hand and grows warmer with the passing. And one of those words pointed towards something like trust. Not the sharp and effortful trust that grips and checks and worries at the edges of what it is trusting, but the soft and open trust that simply releases, the way the hand in sleep releases whatever it was holding, not because it decided to release, but because the grip, in the end, simply let go on its own, because holding on requires a kind of wakefulness that sleep, in its kindness, gradually withdraws. And this is what the old teachings were pointing toward, in their slow and patient way. Not a forced surrender, not a decision to stop caring, or stop feeling, or stop being present inside the confusion and the tenderness and the not knowing of a human life, but something softer than that, a kind of allowing, a slow releasing of the grip that the mind keeps on the shape it thinks things should take, the way they should feel, the way the self should be moving forward, the progress it should be making, the certainty it should have arrived at by now. Because the mind grips. This is one of the gentlest and most honest things the old teachers noticed about the nature of the mind, that it grips, that it reaches out and takes hold of thoughts and experiences and identities and ideas about who we are and where we are going, and it holds them close. And it does this not out of any failure or weakness, but out of something that was, once, a kind of care, a reaching towards safety, a wish to be certain, to be steady, to know the shape of the ground before the foot comes down. But the ground is always unknown, in the end. The next breath arrives before it can be planned. The next moment opens the way a door opens in a quiet house, without announcement, simply there and then present, and then already becoming the next moment, before the mind has had time to fully register the one before. And the grip, however tight, cannot actually stop this, cannot slow it or change it, or make the world hold still long enough to be fully understood. The world moves with a kind of gentle and unstoppable patience that has nothing to do with hurry and nothing to do with urgency, and everything to do with the simple nature of what it is to be alive inside time. And so the teaching is this. The teaching is always, in its quietest form, this. Soften the grip, not all at once, not through effort or discipline, or the application of some technique that must be practiced and perfected before it can be used, but simply and gradually, and the way it is happening right now, in this room, in this dark, as the body grows heavier and the breath grows slower and the thoughts grow more and more like distant water, like sound heard through walls, like the memory of something that was only half experienced to begin with. The grip softens because the body is asking it to soften, because sleep, when it comes, asks for nothing else, because there is no way to fall asleep while still holding everything tightly. The falling itself requires a loosening, and so every night, whether the mind understands it or not, whether the teachings have been studied or not, whether the word for it has ever been found or not, every night the same small miracle happens in the quiet of the dark room. The grip softens, the hand opens, the thoughts grow loose, and the self, whatever it is, wherever it was trying to get to, drifts down through the layers of a quiet that is older than any question the self has ever asked about itself. The old teachers spoke of the mind as being like the surface of water. When it is agitated, when the thoughts are many and quick and tangled with each other, The surface breaks and flickers and reflects nothing clearly. Everything distorted, everything incomplete. But when the mind grows still, when the thoughts slow and the breath deepens, and the body lets go of its last small tensions, the surface becomes smooth and wide and open, and what is reflected there is simply what is, without distortion, without the urgency of needing it to be something other than what it is. And this is not a thing to achieve. This is not something that requires the mind to be trained or perfected, or brought to some special state through years of careful practice. It is happening right now. The surface is smoothing right now, with each slow breath that leaves the body, with each small release that happens in the shoulders, in the jaw, in the hands lying open and quiet on the bed. The smoothing is not something being done, it is something being allowed, and there is a difference between those two things that is as wide and as quiet as the difference between a river that has been dammed and a river that has simply been permitted to flow in the direction it was always already flowing. Let the breath be that river. Let it move in its own direction, at its own pace, without any management or adjustment or careful attention to whether it is moving correctly. The breath knows. The body knows. There is a deep and ancient intelligence in the body that has been breathing since before the mind knew any words for breathing, and it will keep breathing long after the mind has grown too quiet to notice, and it does not need any guidance or supervision from the part of the self that lies awake in the dark and wonders if it is doing things correctly. That wondering can rest now. That careful, watching part of the self that checks and monitors and measures and asks whether the relaxation is happening correctly, whether the sleep is coming quickly enough, whether the letting go is being done in the right way, that part can simply be set down, the way a lamp is set down when the room has been found and the door has been closed and there is nothing left to look for. The lamp can go out, the searching can stop, the room has been found. The room is this, the dark and the warmth and the breath and the body that is growing heavier with each moment, sinking with each exhale deeper into the softness beneath it. There is a teaching about the nature of the self that arrives in the old texts wrapped in many layers of careful language, but at its center it is very simple, and in the drowsiness of the late night it can be felt rather than understood, which is perhaps the truest way it was ever meant to be known. The teaching is simply that the self is not as solid as it feels, that what feels like a fixed and separate and bounded thing, a self with clear edges and a definite location, is actually something more like a weather pattern than a stone, something that arises from many conditions, that changes with those conditions, that is never quite the same from one moment to the next, and that is, beneath all the apparent complexity, mostly space, mostly openness, mostly the quiet that exists between one thought and the next, the way the night sky is mostly space between the stars, and the stars, for all their brightness, are not the whole of what the sky is. And this is not a frightening thought. In the half-dark of the drifting mind, it is almost a relief. Because if the self is mostly space, mostly openness, mostly the quiet between thoughts, then the feeling of being lost is not a failure of the self. It is not the self breaking or going wrong or missing something that was always supposed to be there. It is simply the self, in a moment of unusual honesty, recognizing its own nature, recognizing that it is made of something more like water than like wood, something that takes the shape of its container and then releases that shape when the container changes, and is not diminished by the releasing, is not less for having been poured from one vessel into another, is still water, still essentially itself, still capable of reflecting the light and carrying warmth and running gently toward the sea. The sea. The image of it is soft and far away, the way the sea sounds from a great distance, a continuous and unhurried sighing, the breath of something immeasurably large and patient, moving in its own slow rhythm that has nothing to do with the small rhythms of the individual life, and everything to do with the wider rhythm of which each individual life is a quiet part. The tide goes out, the tide comes back. The waters shift and change across the long surface of the deep, and none of it is lost, and none of it is wasted, and the sea does not know the word for lost, does not know the word for found, knows only the steady and immeasurable fact of its own continuing presence. And you are near the shore of something like that now, something wide, something that does not have a name in the language of the waking mind, but that the body recognizes the way it recognizes warmth, the way it recognizes the feeling of being held. a presence that is not inside the thoughts but beneath them, not something the mind can grasp, but something the body, in its wisdom, can simply rest within. The way a leaf rests on the surface of water, held by something it does not understand, going wherever the water carries it, toward no particular destination, in no particular hurry, simply there and drifting, and completely at ease. The drift is the teaching. This is perhaps the softest form of what the old teachers were pointing toward, in all their patient centuries of pointing. Not the sharp insight that cuts through confusion with a sudden and startling clarity. Not the dramatic moment of understanding in which everything rearranges itself into a new and luminous order. But this, the slow drift, the gradual releasing, the way the mind, in growing still, does not become empty but becomes spacious. The way the thoughts, in slowing, do not disappear but grow gentle. The way the wind grows gentle toward evening, still present, still moving through the leaves, but no longer urgent, no longer insisting, simply breathing. To be lost, in this light, is to be in a space of unusual openness, a space where the familiar maps have grown unclear, and the usual roads are harder to find, and the self has been, in some gentle and involuntary way, set free from the certainty of knowing exactly where it is, and exactly where it is going. And the old teachings say, in their patient and unhurried way, that this space, however uncomfortable it can feel in the daylight, is actually closer to the truth of things than the feeling of certainty ever was. That the certainty, however comforting, was always a kind of simplification, a smooth story laid over a more complex and more beautiful and more mysterious reality. And the lostness, the genuine lostness, the honest acknowledgement that the world is larger than the map, and the map was always only a drawing of the world and not the world itself. That lostness is the beginning of a more honest way of being present inside the life that is actually happening, as opposed to the life that was expected, or planned, or assumed. But these are thoughts for another time. Or perhaps they are thoughts for no particular time, thoughts that can simply be allowed to drift through the mind the way clouds drift through a wide sky, without needing to be followed, without needing to lead anywhere, without needing to be anything other than what they are, in the moment they are present, which is simply soft shapes moving slowly through a large and patient quiet. The quiet is here. The quiet is very much here. It is in the room and in the body, and in the slow and gentle space between one breath and the next. It is in the heaviness of the arms and the stillness of the legs, and the complete and total softness of the face that has let go of every last small expression and is now simply resting, simply present, as still as the face of someone who has already arrived somewhere very far and very deep inside the territory of sleep. The heaviness in the body is a kindness. This is something the body knows even when the mind has not thought to notice it. That the heaviness is not a burden but a gift. That gravity, the gentle and constant presence of gravity, is the earth's quiet way of holding the body close, of saying, in its patient and wordless language, that the body belongs here, that the body is welcome here, that the body can rest here without apology and without condition, and without any requirement to be lighter or more alert or more awake than it is in this moment, which is not alert at all, which is drifting, which is sinking, gently and slowly, through the last thin layers of wakefulness, the way a breath sinks, the way warmth spreads, the way the night deepens, without effort, without arrival, simply going deeper, and the thoughts are very far now, like lights seen from a great distance, across a wide and quiet, dark water, simply there, and growing, smaller, and the body is completely still, and somewhere beneath the thoughts, beneath even the awareness of thoughts, there is something that has been resting all along, something that did not need to wait for the mind to grow quiet in order to be at peace, because it was never not at peace, because peace is not something it arrived at, but something it simply is, the way the dark water beneath the surface of a lake is simply still, simply dark, simply water, not still because the wind stopped, but still in a way that has nothing to do with wind, still in a way that has nothing to do with weather or effort or the cessation of anything at all, but still in the way that depth is still, in the way that the very bottom of something is still, where the light barely reaches and the movement of the surface is only a distant and fading impression, something felt but not quite remembered, something that was once present but has now grown very thin and very far away. And you are somewhere near that depth now, near the place where the distinction between resting and sleeping, between thinking and dreaming, between the self that is aware and the awareness itself, has become very soft and very uncertain, like the shore at night when the water and the sand are nearly the same color, and it is hard to say exactly where one ends and the other begins. And it does not matter. It has never mattered. The water knows where it is, and the sand knows where it is, and the meeting of them is simply what it is. A quiet and unhurried meeting, a slow negotiation that has been happening for longer than any map was ever drawn. There is a word in the old teachings, a soft word, a word that does not translate cleanly into the language of the waking mind, but that can be felt more than it can be understood. And the word points towards something like the natural settling of things, the way everything, left to itself, finds its own level, the way water finds its own level, the way the breath, when it is no longer being managed or watched or directed, finds its own quiet rhythm, slower than you might have chosen for it, deeper than you might have expected, moving in and out of the body with the unhurried regularity of something that simply knows what it is doing and has always known, and does not need to be reminded or corrected or helped. The breath is doing that now, simply moving, simply being breath, and the body around it is simply being body, warm and heavy, and completely without urgency, without the smallest requirement to be anywhere other than exactly here, in this warmth, in this dark, in this soft and gathering stillness that is not an absence but a presence, not emptiness but the particular and unmistakable fullness of a night that has grown very deep and very quiet and very close. The old teachers often used the image of a lamp, not a bright lamp, not a lamp that illuminates a whole room with sharp clarity, but a small lamp, a very soft lamp, the kind that glows rather than shines, that makes the darkness around it seem warmer rather than smaller, that does not chase the shadows away, but simply rests among them, offering its small and steady warmth to whatever is near. And they said that something in each person is like that lamp, not the part that thinks or plans or worries or hopes, not the part that is lost or found or searching or arriving, but the part that is simply present, simply here, quietly glowing in a way that does not depend on anything outside itself, that is not brighter when things go well, and not dimmer when things feel difficult, that simply continues, steady and warm and entirely itself, the way a flame in a still room simply continues, neither growing nor fading, simply burning because that is what flames do, because that is what they are. And you carry that. Whatever else is true about the night and the week, and the particular shape of the feeling that has been sitting somewhere in the chest or the shoulders, beneath all of that, at a level much quieter than any of that, you carry that small and steady warmth. You have always carried it. It was not something given to you on a good day and taken away on a difficult one. It was not something you earned or found or figured out. It was simply there, beneath the searching, the way the ground is beneath the walking, present in every step, even when the walking was the only thing you were aware of, even when the ground itself never entered your thoughts. Even then, even all along, simply there. And to feel lost is not to have lost that. This is what the old teachers kept returning to, in their patient and circling way, the way a river returns to the same bend, not because it is confused, but because the river knows something about that bend, has something to say about that bend that cannot be said all at once. What they kept returning to was this, that the feeling of lostness is a feeling, and feelings move through the open space of awareness the way clouds move through sky, and the sky does not become lost because clouds are present, does not become confused, does not stop being sky, does not lose its depth or its quietness, or its patient and enormous capacity to simply hold whatever passes through it, without being changed by the passing. The awareness that is here right now, soft and warm and barely awake, is like that sky. The thoughts that have moved through it today, the worries, the plans, the memories, the uncertainties, all of them have passed through without leaving a mark on the awareness itself, the way birds pass through sky without leaving a mark on the sky, the way breath passes through a quiet room without rearranging the room, simply passing through, simply moving, and then simply gone, and the sky still sky, and the room still room, and the awareness still here, still warm, still quiet, still holding everything gently and holding nothing tightly, open in the way that night is open, in the way that sleep is open, in the way that the space between one thought and the next is open, which is very open, which is very wide, which is wider than you might have guessed, wide enough for everything, wide enough for the lostness and the not knowing and the quiet hope and the deep tiredness and all of it at once, wide enough to hold all of it, without strain, without effort, without the smallest contraction. Let the jaw be soft, let the throat be soft. Let the space behind the eyes be as wide and dark and restful as the sky on a clear night, when the moon has set, and the stars are there but far away, and everything is simply resting in its own natural darkness, which is not a frightening darkness, but a kind one, a familiar one, the darkness that the body moves toward at the end of every day, the way a bird moves toward its own particular tree, at the end of its own particular afternoon. Not because it decided to, not because it remembered to, but simply because that is what the body knows to do, because rest is not a choice so much as a returning to something that was always there, that is always there, that will be there again tomorrow night, and the night after, and every soft night that follows in the long and gentle succession of nights that make up a life. The teachings on lostness are, in the end, teachings on trust, not a forceful trust, not a trust that has to be built or maintained or defended, but the soft trust of a body that has allowed itself to grow heavy. The trust that is present in the way the muscles have let go of their long days holding, the way the hands have uncurled, the way the face has grown still. That kind of trust is not a belief. It is not an idea. It is something the body does when the mind has grown quiet enough to stop arguing, when the mind has grown quiet enough to let the body remember what it knows, which is that rest is safe, and warmth is good, and darkness is kind, and there is nowhere that needs to be reached tonight, no understanding that needs to be completed, no problem that will not still be there, exactly as it was, tomorrow, waiting patiently, not going anywhere, not requiring anything from this particular moment, this particular softness, this particular and irreplaceable sinking into the warmth and the dark, and the slow and steady breathing that is happening now almost entirely on its own. The body breathes. That is worth staying with for a moment, in the softest possible way, not concentrating, not watching, not directing, simply noticing, from a great and drowsy distance, that the breath is happening without you, that the chest is rising and falling with a quiet and reliable regularity that requires nothing from the thinking mind, that would continue just as steadily and just as gently, whether the mind were busy or still, awake or dreaming, holding on or letting go. The breath does not need you to remember it. The breath does not need you to understand it. The breath simply continues, and somewhere in that continuing is a very quiet kind of teaching, softer than any words, older than any words, a teaching that is simply the fact of the breath itself, the fact that something in you knows how to continue without effort, knows how to sustain without strain, knows how to keep going in the most fundamental and unremarkable and beautiful way, in the dark, in the quiet, in the warmth, simply going, simply being, simply breath. There is a kind of peace that visits people when they have stopped trying to find peace. The old teachers noticed this and wrote about it in their careful and unhurried way, noting that the search for stillness often disturbed the very stillness it was searching for, the way a hand reaching into a still pool disturbs the water, so that the reflection that was there a moment ago is now broken into small moving pieces that bear no resemblance to the clear image that was there before the reaching. And they said that the stillness does not disappear when it is disturbed. It only waits. It waits with extraordinary patience, because patience is not something it practices but something it is. The way depth is patient, the way darkness is patient, the way the ground beneath a winter field is patient, holding all that will eventually grow, in no hurry, without anxiety, without any need to rush the arrival of what is coming, simply holding, simply waiting, simply being the ground. And the stillness that waited while the day was busy and the mind was moving and the world was asking things of you, that stillness did not go away. It was not lost. It was simply waiting, the way it always waits, with no impatience and no judgment, and no accumulation of anything resembling resentment for having been made to wait, because waiting and not waiting are the same thing to stillness, because stillness does not experience time the way the busy mind experiences time, does not feel the hours passing, does not feel the urgency of the clock, simply rests inside the moment, the way light rests inside a stone, present and quiet and not going anywhere, not needing to go anywhere, entirely content to be simply what it is, in whatever moment it finds itself, which is always this moment, which is always only this, which is always only now, and now again, each now soft and warm, and exactly like the last, each breath arriving and leaving, like a small and trusted tide, like the gentlest possible reminder that something is always returning, that nothing that matters is ever finally gone, that the tide goes out and the tide comes back, and the shore is always there, simply there, receiving whatever arrives with the same quiet and unhurried welcome it has always offered, the same soft and wordless welcome it is offering now, to the body that is resting, and the mind that is nearly still, and the breath that is slow, and the night that is deep, and the warmth that is complete, and the darkness that is kind, so kind, the kindest possible darkness, the darkness of a room that is yours, and a bed that is warm, and a night that is long, and a sleep that is coming, so softly. The way all good things come, when the trying has stopped, the way the deepest rest arrives, not when it is summoned, but when the door is simply left open, and the warmth outside is the same as the warmth inside, and there is no longer any difference between the resting and the rest, between the drifting and the drift, between the one who is falling asleep and the sleep itself, opening, like a warm and unhurried flower, opening not because anyone asked it to, not because the light demanded it, not because there was anything required of it at all, but simply because opening is what it does, because opening is what it is, because somewhere in the nature of softness there is always this slow unfolding, this gradual and wordless releasing of whatever was held, whatever was carried, whatever the day gathered and placed quietly in the arms without asking, all of it now setting itself down, the way snow sets itself down, without sound, without effort, with only the softest possible arrival, each flake an entire journey ending in the gentlest possible landing, on a surface that was already still, on a field that was already quiet, on a night that was already asking for nothing more than this, than the slow descending of whatever needs to fall. And the old teachers had a word for the way things are allowed to simply be themselves, without correction, without adjustment, without the constant gentle violence of improvement. It was a word that meant something like suchness, like the quality a thing has of simply being exactly what it is, without apology and without effort, a stone being stone, water being water, the breath being breath, the tiredness being tiredness, the lostness being lostness. They meant it as a kind of praise, not a resigned praise, not a praise born of giving up, but a genuine and wondering recognition that the nature of a thing, exactly as it is already complete, already whole, already more than sufficient in its own particular and unrepeatable way. What they were offering when they offered this teaching was not a solution to the feeling of being lost, but something quieter and perhaps more useful than a solution. They were offering a kind of companionship with the feeling itself, a willingness to sit with it in the dark the way you might sit with an old friend who is sad, not trying to fix the sadness, not trying to explain it away, not rushing to find the silver lining that would dissolve it like sugar in warm water, but simply being there, in the same darkness, in the same quiet, letting the feeling be what it is for as long as it needs to be, which is never as long as the worried mind imagines, never quite as permanent as the fearful part of us insists, because feelings move, they always move. They are not made of stone or iron or anything that holds its shape indefinitely. They are made of something much more like water, like weather, like the light that changes so gradually across an afternoon that you cannot quite say when the gold became the grey, only that at some point the room was different, softer, and the day was turning gently into evening. And the body knows this, the body that is lying here now, resting in the warmth, settling into the familiar softness of the bed. The body already understands in a way that is deeper than words, that feelings pass, that discomfort softens, that tension loosens, all on its own when the conditions are right, when the warmth is sufficient, and the dark is kind, and the weight of the blanket is exactly the gentle pressure that reminds the nervous system that it is held, that it is supported, that it does not need to brace for anything tonight. That bracing is something for the daytime world, and the daytime world is very far away now, farther with every breath, receding the way a shoreline recedes when a small boat moves slowly out across still water, not dramatically, not with any urgency, just growing quieter and smaller and more distant until it is simply a soft line between the water and the sky, and then not even that, just the open water, just the silence, just the gentle motion of the boat on the surface of something very deep. The teachers often spoke about depth as though it were the most natural destination, the place that was always there beneath the surface of things, not requiring any special journey, not requiring any particular preparation, simply requiring the willingness to let the surface settle, to stop stirring the water, to allow what is underneath to be present in its own way, in its own time, in the unhurried and reliable way that depth is always present, always waiting, always entirely indifferent to how long you took to notice it. The depth does not reward the one who arrived quickly. The depth does not punish the one who arrived after a long and circuitous wandering. The depth simply receives whatever comes to it with exactly the same welcome, the same cool and embracing quiet, the same wordless recognition that everything that sinks into depth was always on its way here, was always, in some sense, already here. And so when the feeling of being lost arrives, and it does arrive, it arrives in every life without exception, without regard for how carefully the life was planned or how wisely the choices were made. When it arrives, it is perhaps something like an invitation to go deeper, not a punishment, not a sign of failure, not a symptom of something broken that needs to be found and fixed before the life can properly continue, but a kind of invitation, the kind that doesn't announce itself clearly, the kind that arrives wearing the clothes of discomfort, of confusion, of the vague and restless sense that something is missing or misaligned or not quite right, and only later, much later, often only in retrospect, in the long view, in the quiet that comes after the weather has passed, only then does it become clear that the lostness was the beginning of something, the first slow motion of a turning that would eventually bring something new into view. And there is no need to rush that turning. There is no need to understand it tonight. Understanding is a daytime occupation, a thing that belongs to the light, to the waking hours when the mind is clear and the questions are sharp and the world is asking for answers. This is not that time. This is the other time, the time that belongs to the body and the dark and the breath and the long, slow settling into rest. And in this time, the only thing that is asked of you is nothing. The only requirement is the absence of requirement. The only task is the beautiful and complete absence of tasks. The sinking, the warming, the quieting, the breathing, the slow and inevitable and entirely welcome descent into the place where thinking rests and the deeper knowing takes its unhurried turn. Let the jaw soften. Let the forehead smooth. Let the space behind the eyes grow wide and dark and still as a lake in the last hour before dawn. The teachers spoke often about the hour before dawn. They found something in it that felt important, something they tried to point toward with their careful and gentle words. The world at that hour, they said, is as quiet as it ever becomes. That particular quality of quiet that is not empty but full of something that has no name, full of the accumulated stillness of the long night, as though all the silence that has been gathering since the last light faded has finally reached its deepest point, its most complete expression, and rests there for a little while before the world begins again. And they said that in that particular quiet, in that deepest part of the night, a certain kind of clarity was sometimes available, not the clarity of answers, but the clarity of acceptance, the soft and wide-open recognition that things are as they are, that the river goes where it goes, that the breath continues, that the body is warm, that whatever could not be understood today is simply resting, the way everything rests, somewhere it cannot be disturbed. The letting. Soft and slow. The dark is warm. The body is heavy in the kindest way. Somewhere, very gently, a thought trails off and is not replaced. And the quiet moves in where the thought was, and the quiet is good, and the quiet is enough. And you are resting now, fully, gently, held in the night, which has always been only this.